I was telling you, kind of before we went live, I've not always known why I was prompted to invite someone to be on the program. I think that's become clear to me in just the last few minutes because you had an experience of uh, where you feel like it's time for you to tell your story, and I haven't heard it, but just a little bit of it. So I want you to just roll into it, and I'm going to sit back. Let's tell your life
Yeah.
story.
It started out in a very interesting way, I guess, because I was born January 7th of 55. Okay. 3 weeks later, my father died. My dad dies. Okay.
Mm.
He's 25 years old. He goes in the hospital, appendicitis. They operate on him. He gets an infection and dies. So there's my mother with a brand new baby, 3-week-old baby, lost her husband. So she moves back in with her family. And about a year later, she marries Jim McClellan. Okay. And so then, Jim McClellan was one of 13 children, grew up with an abusive, alcoholic father. And basically, he had an eighth grade education. He really quit school in the eighth grade just so that he could work and bring money home to his mother and be able to bring things into the house. And so, when she married him about a year later, they decided to adopt me. And then they had 4 other children. So I had 2 sisters and then 2 brothers. And so growing up, adopted and the oldest of the 5 was real interesting because, when you look at somebody, when you're really kind of studying people, you look at somebody and you think, that person doesn't really like me. You ever get that feeling like, like no matter what I do, I just can't seem to do it good enough or whatever. And that was, I guess, pretty much the feeling that I had most of my young life is like, I just I wasn't right. You know what I'm saying?
Mm.
And so, and I guess really, and I made a few notes about like, what were the negatives in that? But then also, there were some positives, but basically the way I look at the negative part of that was that he lived his life with us like he grew up. He brought that alcoholism, he brought the abusiveness into our family. And, I think there's people, you're around people that are drinking and they're happy and, the life of the party. And then there's that mean drunk, that just was not a bad guy when he wasn't drinking, but when he started drinking, like, the world changed, you know what I'm saying? And I used to talk about how difficult it was and, the abuse on us and the abuse on my mother. I watched him, beat my mother many, many times. And, so as I got to be a little older and I really I didn't know that I was adopted until some years later. And then I found some things about my dad. Okay. And I remember bringing them up one time at a dinner table. Like, what was my dad like was the question I can remember. And, Jim jumps up from the table and runs off crying. And I was told that I should never, ever say that again. Don't ever bring that up again. So it was almost like, the secrets were what was obvious. I would have thought that why wouldn't we talk about that? Or why wouldn't we, deal with those kind of things? And what was the problem? I mean, I'm here, you adopted me, I can't go anywhere. He's not alive. I can't leave. You know what I'm saying? So why couldn't we talk about it? And that my whole life was a challenge for me that we really couldn't discuss that. And I think like, the pivotal points were, like sports and things that I wanted to do. I can remember him saying things like, don't keep up with the Joneses. Don't be a glory hog, and I know now looking back, it was his self-esteem that kind of lowered the standards, I guess, if I can use that as an example. But so the whole time that I was in high school and middle school and trying to compete at any level, it was always like, well, don't do that, And I joke, I should have been a halfback and a wrestler. I was really, really good at both of those, but I was never allowed to do that because that's like the glory positions in a sense,
So he held you back a lot.
Yeah, and I really feel like he did in a sense, and it was almost a lot of like the reverse psychology. You're not good enough. You can't do this. So it drove me to do it. As an example, I played middle linebacker in high school at 140 pounds. You know what I'm saying? Played hard and actually turned out to be pretty good at that. Lifted weights at a really high level, competed powerlifting and things, but was always kind of, never allowed to really do what I think I would have been really good at. Okay. So, and I think that was probably a pivotal point. I remember one time, I was lifting weights and I got really strong, and he came to me and he said, he kind of threatened me and he said, if you ever get the urge that you can take me, I just want you to know that, I would use a pipe. I would use whatever it takes
Really?
to never lose. And I was thinking, whoa.
Your dad who adopted you is not going to take a pipe after you if he has to.
Well, that's what he said. You know what I'm
Wow.
saying? So, man, like you're a teenager. You know what I'm saying?
You sounds like you got kind of had a harsh upbringing. Am I reading more into this than I should?
I think, and as I get through this, I think that, he never could say he loved us. You know what I'm saying? And that may have been that generation. I look at it now and I think back. You grow up with one of 13, your dad's never around. Your mother's pregnant your whole life. You know what I'm saying? I mean, poor thing. We counted it one day. She was pregnant for 27 years, pregnant or with a baby for 27 years. That's pretty crazy when you think about it. And so that was their lifestyle, And so, but I can remember times when the house was like an explosion. It was like this 800-pound gorilla came home and just rocked everybody's world. And, I remember one time he was really, really drunk, and he and my mother were in a big fight, and he was going to go back out again. He was going to go back to the bar again or whatever. And she stood in front of the door and wasn't going to let him out. So he put his hand on her throat and he cocked his hand like he was going to punch her. And I don't even know why, but I just jumped up and got in the middle of that. And I remember grabbing his throat and cocking my hand. And there we stood face to face looking at each other. And he broke the hold on my mother and just ran away, ran upstairs. And she looked at me and said, "You need to apologize for that." And I said, "Whoa." I said, "Well, I'm not going to apologize. I may have just saved your life, but you're about as sick as he is." You know what I'm saying? And that at that point, and I was like a late teenager at that point. And really that's kind of when I decided that I need to get out of here. You know what I'm saying? Like I need to leave and I need to get out of here.